started to play in our healthcare delivery system that perhaps it didn't before?
Okay, well, I wrote a little thing down for this one. So
All right.
I'm going to look at my cheat sheet. So I think, so there's really the biggest thing that has suffered or changed in the healthcare system, I think, is the doctor-patient relationship. And I think that there's two ways that this has been beaten up. We have lost the amount of time we get to spend with patients.
Yes.
And patients have also lost trust in us. The way that we have lost time, really two big ways. Insurance reimbursement has effectively decreased over the years, so that in order to make enough money to keep your doors open, you have to see a higher volume of patients. And so you will see a patient scheduled every 10 to 30 minutes. The common scheduling is every 15 minutes. That is not enough time to see a patient well. And so that has really affected how much a patient can get across to their physician, how much can that physician really talk to that patient, ask questions, really dig down into the history and find out what's going on with this patient. The second big thing that has eroded the patient-physician relationship is electronic medical records. Physicians often now will stare at their computer instead of looking at the patient. They will be charting while they're asking questions. So you're not fully present with the patient, and you're not using your 15 minutes to really learn about why that patient's there. You're thinking about, let me chart this so I can get to the next patient so I don't leave here at 8 o'clock tonight. And so I was reading some statistics for today. The average physician spends 4.5 hours a day charting on their electronic medical records or doing desk work. 25% of their time in their day is with patients in direct care. 50% is with the EMR or desk work.
Oh my goodness.
And so, like I said, we have a 15-minute visit for each patient, but we spend an average of 16 minutes charting on each visit outside of the visit. So that is where the majority of our time is going. And that is just not a good way to provide care. And it also leads to huge burnout for physicians. Like I said, I mean, I'll stay till 7:30, 8 o'clock at night finishing my charts or come in the next day. And then the other way that medicine has been affected and the doctor-patient relationship is affected is trust in medicine. And I think that really was shown during the pandemic when physicians stuck to the one main narrative that was the accepted mainstream narrative of what are you supposed to do with masks, and then what are you supposed to do as far as staying home, and then what are you supposed to do as far as the COVID vaccine. And if a patient had a question or a concern, like, is this really right? Do I need to do this? I'm worried about this new technology. Most doctors stuck with the mainstream narrative. And a lot of it's because many doctors believe that. They don't do their own research. They trust the CDC. They trust their professional organizations. But some doctors may have known that not everything that was being said was true, but they also needed to keep their job. And if they spoke outside the mainstream narrative, then they risked losing their job.
And that's because most doctors work for a hospital group or a doctor's group.
Yes.
Maybe you can give us a little insight or information of how the medical doctor is employed today.
Right. So over the last 10, 15 years, more and more physician practices are being purchased by hospitals, healthcare systems, or private equity. There's only about 44% of physicians that are in private practice now, where they own themselves. And that is a huge shift over the last 10, 15 years. And the reason for that is, like I said, reimbursements are going down from insurers. So if you join a hospital group, you now have more clout. You now get the contracts of a bigger group. And so you will typically get better reimbursement. You also, many times, don't have to, quote, run a practice. So the hospital system runs it for you, which, especially younger physicians, they like that work-life balance. Yeah. They don't want to have to run a practice. But when you don't run your own practice, you don't run your own practice. You don't hire, you don't fire, you don't make the rules. You are then told what to do. So older physicians tend to like to still run their practices. Younger physicians are actually selling more frequently. So 44% of all physicians are still solo practitioners or privately owned, but only 31% of physicians under the age of 45 are privately owned.
And I guarantee that's going to get smaller.
It's going to get smaller and smaller. So yes, it is financially and sometimes life balance, in a way, a better choice for many physicians to be owned. So yeah.
Wow. What you just said. Did you hear that, Chad?
I heard that. Yeah. Owned.
Owned. They are owned.
Is there even a form of peer pressure that happened within this whole deal as well within the doctors? I mean, did you find that other doctors would scrutinize you for speaking out, or did they just not say anything?
Oh.
Did I open something up here?
So
Maybe.
So yeah, that I have had the most amazing re-education of my life in the last 3.5 years. I mean, my eyes have been opened. I am a completely different person today than I was 4 years ago. I am braver. I am more honest with myself. I am more aware of the prejudices of my colleagues. I am more aware of the fears of my colleagues. And I see where they're all coming from. But yes, if you were a physician who dared to speak anything outside the mainstream narrative at any point in the last 3.5, 4 years, yes, you were scrutinized. Yes, you were persecuted. Yes, attempts were made on many different levels to stop your speech, to shut you down, to silence you.
And they came hard against you
Yeah.
because you ran for school board and then you didn't.
Right. So, and I ran for school board in 2021, not because of COVID, but because of the way that we teach reading in Blue Valley, which is my kid's school district. Because I realized when my 9th grader was reading To Kill a Mockingbird, she didn't understand it. And so I sat down and read it with her, and I realized, oh my gosh, she doesn't know how to read very well. And she's an honors student. And so I got her evaluated, and I found out there were a lot of problems with her reading. And so then I started learning how we taught reading in Blue Valley, and we taught with sight words, not phonics. And so I did research about how we had taught reading in the country for the last century, and I learned that there had been a shift from phonics, which is how all of us were taught in this room, to sight words. And you cannot learn to read with sight words. You cannot memorize every word. And so we had 25 to 30% of kids that couldn't read, not only in 2nd or 3rd grade, but also even up into high school at a grade level. And so that's what I ran on. I figured out a program on how we could train these teachers to teach kids phonics, how much it would cost. I found the program, and that's what I ran for school board on, is to teach kids to read in our Blue Valley School District, to change the way we did that. But the problem was I was a physician, a pediatrician, who had spoken about getting kids in school in August of 2020 through February of 2021. How dare I? And then I had started speaking in spring of 2021 to have a choice on masks. And that is all that the school board race was made at that point.
And it was a witch hunt.
Yep.
I mean, I have never seen anything like that play out in front of my face. Like I watched how the hate and vitriol, and I can't imagine what you went through, on a family level at home, just from a distance. Yeah. I saw it happen, and it was insane. I saw people that are my neighbors, and I mean literal neighbors, say things and take stands against you.
Yeah.
That I could not believe people would do.
Yep.
And they've never met you. They have no idea who you are. They have no idea what you stand for. And there was such this vitriol that came out. It was insane.
It was insane. It was. So the 2 times in my life that were the hardest was when my father was diagnosed with leukemia and then went through that treatment for 7 or 8 months and then ended up dying of graft versus host disease after his transplant. Oh. That was a hard time in my life. That was about 10 years ago. This sounds awful, but acutely this was worse because it was in a shorter time frame. But this was worse. I mean, it was awful. And I am lucky that I have my family and I had my amazing husband, who probably literally saved my life. But yeah, it was awful.
Yeah. That's one of the ways healthcare has changed. You know?
What?
Oh, this very thing. You're a pediatrician. You were trying to do what you can to support your daughter in her ability to read. And in addition to that, you were also advocating for there to be choice whether or not children should use masks or not, because you knew there was no evidence to support it. So why not give them a choice? Mm-hmm. And you went from being, in the introduction, you remember I said, some doctor, you get notoriety if you have the DR in front of your name, whether you want it or not, or you deserve it or not. But you were directly attacked for nothing that you've done in the professional capacity. You've always provided great care to your patients, right?
Yes.
It's never compromised.
Right.
You were doing everything you could to present evidence for choice in this. Mm-hmm. Everything that's sane and rational, you were doing. You never compromised that, but you were put up on the cross and hung there.
Well, and that goes back to the fear. When you have that fear in your brain, you cannot think rationally. And people were so afraid and they wanted there to be an answer out of the situation that we were in. And so they latched onto masks. And that was the savior. It truly, if and when we have another situation like COVID, people have got to control their fear. They have got to try to think rationally. But that's why I was attacked.
Yeah.
And I understand that. And I truly don't blame those people. I mean, I'm on the other side of it now, but I see where they're coming from. They're human. They're fearful. They want something to save them. I get that.
You mean the arrows that made you walk one direction down the grocery store aisle weren't the answer?
So in the process of, I mean, if I heard you right, you've gone through this transition just in yourself from getting to the point where you said you've changed and you've grown from this. So if you were going to educate somebody on how to really start to think for themselves and do their own investigating and really dive in as opposed to just being taking what they've been fed, what would you tell somebody that wanted to become that?
Well, I have two answers for you there. One is what I tell medical students and students that I sometimes will have in my office to precept. And the second is what I tell a full-grown, just layperson adult. So medical students, I love getting medical students because, they've been told one thing for their whole educational process. And then if you start to just kind of give them little breadcrumbs and say, hey, look at this tonight. Think about this tonight. Hey, read this. Or, and you start to give them little snippets of stuff. And then they start to ask questions. And then you start to say, okay, I want you to start looking at everything that you're told that is quote unquote settled science. And I want you to see, where does that come from? Is it truly settled? What is the evidence behind that? Or is it just an accepted practice but doesn't really have much depth behind it? And most of them will start to kind of look at things, and hopefully then they'll look at everything differently as they go through their careers. The second group is the adults or teenagers, or even littler kids. I shouldn't sell them short, but trying to meet them where they are. Never preach at anybody, but just say, hey, I understand where you're coming from, and I can see why you feel that way. Here again is something that I might want you to consider. Just think about this, or just read this, or just go to this website and just look around for 10 minutes. So that is, you can't shove all your beliefs on somebody at once. They'll just shut down and they'll defend their position. Right. You just have to gently give them something that piques their interest. So,
and then on the same note, so if you were then working with somebody that recognizes that they are functioning or being run by fear,
right, how
would you help somebody say, okay, I don't want to be fearful anymore? What would you recommend to me to start that process?
Okay. Well, I have, I'm in a little group of doctors called Dr.